The biggest compromise we risk when committing to building a hardware panel such as this one is that we're forever condemned to only really being able to fly one particular aircraft at the highest level of detail. Now, it's not as bad as some people will make out. This cockpit, for example, is designed around the Twin Otter, and more specifically the Aerosoft Twin Otter Extended for FSX and Prepared. But I can fly other aircraft with this, pretty much anything I want. And you know, the further away you get from aircraft that are similar to the Twin Otter, the more compromise you have to make. But I can happily fly the BN2 Islander, or even the Learjet, and many other aircraft. And of course many of the systems are fairly common in many different aircraft. But you will end up with switches in a different layout. Some of the switches won't do precisely what it says on the labels. Some switches may not do anything. And of course to set up a new aircraft to fly, depending on how comprehensively you want to set that up, you have to put in a lot of effort doing the programming of the switches. Now, another thing to point out is this particular cockpit is a, well, I suppose what I would term a kind of 75% hardware cockpit. Now, what I mean by that is we've got buttons and switches for the Twin Otter, at least for pretty much every function we need, and we've got gauges as well, which I didn't have in my original cockpit if you followed along, but I've got gauges now. The 75% comes in because the gauges and the switches are not co-located. In many cases, these gauges behind me have controls on them. This is the autopilot display and control panel. Notionally, we've got things with rotary controls on the navigation instruments and so on. So we have a discrepancy between, you know, we look at an instrument, when we want to adjust it, we have to reach for a button or a switch that's elsewhere on the panel. So that takes away some of the realism. If you were going to go all out and go for a 100% realistic cockpit, the gauges would have their controls co-located. Now, a different compromise that's becoming increasingly popular with the much wider availability of affordable touchscreens is to put your displays on a touchscreen such as this one and operate them. Of course, you can always do this by operating them with the mouse, but operating them with touch controls. Now, that's what I'm going to be looking at specifically today. This is a new screen which I've installed in my cockpit. It's a touch screen, 23-inch touch screen, and I'm running now. Again, I should say that the road divides really, or branches in two different directions here. You could run the virtual cockpit on a touch screen and you could operate the controls. Now you're at the mercy there of how well or less well the vendor of the aircraft has then modelled the virtual cockpit, and particularly in terms of how touchscreen friendly it is, because operating a touchscreen in many cases is not the same as operating with a mouse. But in the other branch of the road we have the situation that I've got modelled here, which is that I'm using a separate 2D panel created in a piece of third-party software, and this is Air Manager. You might have heard of other such products, but this is a 2D representation of the panel. And the thing about Air Manager is it's designed from the ground up to be operated with touchscreen. So we're going to have a much better user experience, hopefully. And then in the background we're seeing, I mean, this is a detail, you can run Air Manager on the same computer as the simulator. I'm not doing that, I'm running Air Manager on a separate computer. So the simulator is displayed on the three screens behind me, and we're not using the virtual cockpit at all. Now you can, and in some cases I do, use the virtual cockpit because it gives you not just a panel, but it gives you the interior of the aircraft, it gives you the superstructure of the aircraft, so you get the windscreen surrounds, some of the overhead panels and so on. I'm not doing that today with the Twin Otter, we've just got the out of the window display. And what I have on the panel behind me, it's not my regular Twin Otter panel, this is the Well, I was going to use the straight out of the box payware twin otter panel, or one of the panels from Sim Innovations, but there's a number of issues with that. One of those issues is that there's two panels and I only have one touchscreen. That's one of the issues. The other issue is that out of the box this panel has some problems. I was hoping to fly this, do the checklist and go end to end and show you all the controls on that panel. Some of the controls have actually got some problems with them, which Sim Innovations are going to be looking into. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a flight and look at essentially operating the autopilot and the navigation controls. That's a good enough representation of what I want to show you, and it means we won't come across any of the particular problems that I've just mentioned. So what I've got here is based on the Sim Innovations payware leftmost twin otter panel. You can get the centre panel as well, which has got many of the overhead switches. But this is the leftmost panel, edited a bit to add a few things in and to take a few things off for the purposes of demonstration. One of the main reasons I did this was because I've got the engine instruments on here. Normally my engine instruments are on a separate panel over to the left, which isn't a touchscreen and which you can't see on the video. So in the interest of showing this clearly and making it more interesting, I've got this panel layout. Now, coming back to the idea of driving a panel off a touchscreen, it's still a compromise, and one of the main bugbears of the touchscreen is rotary controls. Buttons and switches work great, there's no problem with that. You can just flip a button by touching it, more or less, or a switch. Toggle switches work very well as well. But rotary controls are very difficult to do satisfactorily, in fact impossible to do satisfactorily. Well, never say never, but to date nobody has managed to. I think it's fair to say nobody's come up with a completely satisfactory way to do rotary controls on the touchscreen. So that's a problem, and it's a problem that makes you think twice about whether to go with that mode of input. But technology never sleeps, and we have another compromise on a compromise. And to this end I've got one extra thing which you may not have noticed fitted to my reconfigured panel, and that is this little thing here. This is an extra, well, it's a dual concentric rotary control, and it's connected to the Air Manager PC, and that's going to play a starring role in what we're looking at today. That's called a Knobster. Slightly unfortunate name if you live this side of the Atlantic Ocean, but there you go. It's called a Knobster, and it's built by, well, now then, I'm not 100% sure who came up with this, but Ross Barlow is the person that introduced it to me. Ross, I think, has designed this, and in conjunction with somebody else has contrived to create a number of different ways that you can obtain these. This is based on an Arduino Nano board, very cheap board, which, as luck would have it, is now supported by Air Manager version 3. And it's an Arduino with a single control wired into it. That's this dual concentric rotary control, and it's fairly nicely encapsulated in this. I think there's a 3D printed custom enclosure. Now, I'll put some links down below for you if you want to follow this up. Now, there's a website you can go to get all the information on the Knobster. You can buy a kit with all the parts. You can build it reasonably straightforwardly. I didn't need to do that. Russ was kind enough to build one for me and send it over. You can also get, I think, for free, complete instructions on how to source all the parts and build one of these from scratch, if that's what you want to do. I'm not sure if there's an opportunity to buy a fully assembled Knobster or not, but there you go. Now, what is it? Well, it's something that's designed to work in conjunction with the Air Manager gauges, and it'll work with any Air Manager gauge retrospectively without any extra programming. It does require Air Manager version 3, but if you've got Air Manager version 3 and a Knobster, you're good to go. And essentially, I won't tell you this in enormous detail. Russ has got a bunch of his own videos that explain this and he does a much better job than I do. But in a nutshell, any Knobster enabled control, which essentially is mostly the rotary controls on the panel, can be operated by this knob if you touch the control to give it the focus. So if I look at the OBS for the nav2 instrument here, I don't know if you're going to be able to see that on the video, but we'll do this when we go for the flight in more detail. But if I just touch that, there's a highlight on the OBS control, and now the knob operates that control. You may see that moving on the video, maybe not. Likewise, the heading bug is now active with the knob. Altitude select, I'm now selecting that on the knob, and so on. Now the reason I call this a compromise on a compromise is, if we take the altitude pre-select as an example, by going to the touchscreen we now have co-located display and control. Now to do this without the Knobster, I have to press that, slide my finger down, and then rotate it in a circle. It's not actually doing that because the Knobster's turned on. If the Knobster's turned off, that would be operative. So I have a co-located readout and control, but it's fiddly. With the Knobster we give that up, we touch it to select, then we have to go off to manipulate a control in a different location. So anyway, we're back to the 75% hardware compromise. So what I'm going to do now is just try and illustrate some of that by taking a flight. I'm at Nantucket Sound here. This is the new, well it's not new, this is the Bill Womack's Nantucket field, but it's recently been added to the Orbix catalogue. So I've just downloaded or re-downloaded from FTX Central 3. Actually, interestingly enough, I bought the original Nantucket for X-Plane 11 from Bill, and that seems to qualify me for both the prepared and X-Plane 11 versions once I transferred the license to Orbix. So that's a bonus. So we're going to fly from there. We're going to fly up to Cape Cod and then down to Martha's Vineyard, then back up to the, perhaps like a zigzag up to the mainland again, and then finishing off at Block Island, another Orbix strip. And we're going to do that primarily with reference to the radio nav aids, just so that I get to manipulate all of the nav aids and we can see how the Knobster holds up. We're going to fly out on the VOR, which is not quite co-located with the airfield. If you could see it on the GPS, it's just up to the northeast of the airfield. So we need to dial that in. We'll dial that in on nav 1, and we'll do that. We're going to do that on the GPS unit over here, 116.2. So we're going to dial it in. 2. Flip it over to watch the HSI. That comes alive. Now this is the clever bit. So with the Knobster, if we just set a direct to that VOR, it's not very far away actually. So we're going to click the OBS, and then I'm moving over to the Knobster over here, and I'm going to look at the screen. So I'm just going to turn this, and I'm going to turn it. I'm turning it to the left. Oops, no, I want to turn it to the right. We want a 2 indication. It's behind us at the moment. I'm going to turn that knob quite vigorously. So we just want to centre that up. So we need to fly 06 heading after takeoff. That's directly reciprocal to our runway heading. So
Kilo Alpha Charlie Kilo Airport information November 1353 Zulu weather wind 264 at 9er visibility
okay,
10 sky clear temperature 26 dew point 22 altimeter 3005 advise on initial contact that you have information November.
Okay, 3005. Now normally I would dial that in on my hardware panel, but I'm not going to do that today. We're going to dial that in using the Knobster as well. So we have Colesman adjust there, so we click to highlight it. Again, go over to the knob 3005. Well, it is set, but if I just pretend it wasn't set and we dial in 3005 there, and now we're ready to go. We're going to take off, then we're going to do a more or less a 180 and fly towards that VOR. We're going to, in fact, what I'll do is, although I've set up the direct to, what I want to do is exit that VOR on the 02 radial. So if we set that up instead, and then we can be ready. So I want to dial in, no, that's the heading bug, so I want to dial in a from indication on the 02 radial. That's going to be about there. Okay, so we're ready to go. Touch screen, I can release the parking brake by just touching the parking brake handle down there, and we're ready to go. Little bit of a crosswind from the right, 20 degrees. So needing a bit of left rudder here today. That's the airport, just down there. Let's go up to about initially 6,500 feet, and again I'm going to make use of the Knobster for that. If we look at the altitude pre-select, if we highlight that and we just turn the knob, we're going to go for 6,500. Then we're going to go to altitude, well, we can't do that, we have to go up, autopilot 1. We'll put it on indicated airspeed for now, and we can press altitude alert. And then let's see, if we go and select the heading bug, back to the Knobster, and we're going to turn that. Now the heading bug, it's responding very gradually. There's no acceleration on this knob at the moment, which is a bit of a pain. If we now go into heading hold, that's heading roughly in the direction we want to be. In fact, it's not. We want to be over there a bit. We've flown way past that VOR actually. Look over here. So what we want to do is we want to turn left through about 100 degrees, and if I put us on a nav hold, that should now steer us to intercept that outbound course from the VR. Now while we're doing that, we'll set up the next waypoint as another VOR. Well, it's not really a waypoint, but we're going to fly up Cape Cod. There's a sort of spit of land. You can actually, can you see it on this, on the GPS? There is another VOR there. LFV, which we'll put in on nav2, 114.7. So nav2 up here, 114.7. And when I flip that over, we should see nav2 come alive. There it goes. So we need to select the OBS for that, then over to the Knobster, and we just center that up on the 2 indication. And that's going to be a cross check for where we want to be. So like I'm saying, we're going to fly up to Cape Cod. Hopefully we can see on the GPS there's this big spit of land up here, and that LFV VOR is just up at the top there. We're now centered up on the outbound radial on the HSI. If I wanted to just for manoeuvring purposes, I might want to switch to heading mode, in which case I'd select that, and I could just move the heading bug around there by adjusting the Knobster. We get a nice view ahead, but hazy. We've attained our cruising altitude, 6,500. I think we'll go up further actually, so I'm going to select that again. I'm going to go up to, let's try 8.5. And then I want to initiate a climb, and we need to hit alt alert again. There's not too much more to show really about the Knobster. We've got, what else can we do? Well, just touchscreen controls in general. We could, you know, there's a few things we can do on here that are relatively safe to do while we're cruising. We can select auto feather arm, which we don't need. We could do the fire detection test. Now we don't have the fire bell mute on this panel, but I have it on the hardware panel. That's muted, unmuted. We can manipulate the standby boost pumps. In fact, if I turn off the aft boost pump, we'll get caution lights. If I turn on the emergency pump, one of those goes out, so we're safe. If I switch the main pump back on, oh, sorry, pressed the wrong thing there. That one back off. This is a less elegant feature of the Knobster. That fire pull handle is obviously implemented as a Knobster enabled control, and you can see the focus is denoted for these round controls. It's just a circle that's semi-transparent and it covers the round knob. That's not too obtrusive. But for that thing up there, well, the fuel lever, fuel cut-off switch as well. The fire pull handle, like that's buggy. That sort of flip-flops back and forward like that. I'm not sure why it does that. But also another example of this is the fuel selector. That's very obtrusive and not aesthetically very nice at all. What else can we do? Well, we could manipulate that fuel selector by selecting it and turning the knob, and if you see the caution lights that go along with that. That's pretty much it really for what we've got on this panel, and it really makes operating these rotary controls much more satisfactory, particularly when we're dialing things in on the radio nav aids. You know, to do that by, can I show you the alternative? Probably. Let me see. If I disable the Knobster, we're flying on heading hold. If I want to adjust the heading bug now, I have to basically, you see there's no longer a highlight as we had for the Knobster. If I put my finger on it, move it out, we get this blue highlight, and then I can that's not working very well. We'll do this basically. Now that's a very unsatisfactory way to adjust it. It's fiddly, it's long-winded, and it's error prone. Again, if you watch Russ's videos, he does a much better job of illustrating how painful that can be. So Knobster all the way. So we're approaching Block Island. We're still at our cruising altitude. So we need to start to descend. So we're going to go on to airspeed hold. And then we're going to reduce the power. Should get the 80s for Block Island.
Kilo Papa Juliet India Airport information Sierra 1441 Zulu weather wind 314 at 5 visibility 10 sky clear temperature 27 dew point 21 altimeter 3006 advice on initial contact you have information Sierra
3006
Papa Juliet India Airport information Sierra 1441 Zulu weather.
So we're practically there. A little bit wider still. So this is Block Island. If you haven't seen this from Orbix, this is a beautiful piece of scenery. It's a very small airport, but it's beautifully done. And in P3D it looks fantastic with these shadows. It's evening and we've got shadows from the foliage dialed in. A lot of trees on here. And they look great. Oh, we've got shadows from the fence as well. Came in a bit steep there. We're okay, this is a twin otter. We've got reverse thrust, which we're going to need. So there we go, Nantucket to Block Island on a touchscreen featuring the Knobster. From Simware Kits, I believe. Parking brake on, and we're done.